All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Reimagining a Franchise session with some very special guests. Really quick, I want to say thank you to Connor Cook for running tech for this session. She is amazing, one of our AWFC board members. I am Alexa Borden. I am the executive director for the AWFC and a composer. Welcome, welcome. I will be moderating today. Joining me are our amazing guests, Michelle Birsky and Kevin Henthorn. They are a composing duo whose credits include the Lesbian Bar Project, Mother Android, and most recently the Netflix anime series Terminator Zero, which I highly recommend everyone watch if you're a Terminator fan or an anime fan, or if you're not a fan of either of those, you might become one if you watch this series. Michelle, Kevin, welcome.
Thanks so much for having
Thank you
us.
so much. We're
Thank you
excited
for
to be
being
here.
here.
Yeah.
Great. So we're going to dive into their process. We're going to ask a lot of questions. If you have any questions for Kevin and Michelle, please put them in the chat. We can try to get to them while we're discussing, or we'll have some time for questions at the end. So Michelle and Kevin, can you start us off by describing your composing journey? What brought you into the film scoring world?
Yeah. So hey everyone, good to see some familiar faces. Um, I started off, I went to school for music, but it was a very general music degree. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I didn't know what career paths were really an option for musicians. And I knew about film composing, but it wasn't top of mind. And when I left school, I started a band, and that is sort of my into this world. It's kind of coming from a different door, but I had a band called Birch. I was like trying to be the next Maggie Rogers. Easier said than done. And after a while, I think people started asking me to score their short films. And like, I realized very, very quickly upon scoring my first short film called Girl Talk, that I was obsessed with it and I really wanted to follow this path. Um, and the next time I got an opportunity, I invited my boyfriend at the time, Kevin, to join me. And we co-scored it, and we've been doing that ever since.
Yeah.
And for you?
For me, I've always been a guitarist since I was very young. So music has always been a big part of my life. A lot of bands, so many different iterations over the years. And I actually went to film school. I've always been kind of I thought like in I don't know combative, like I couldn't decide what I loved more, film or music, and I was always just like wrestling like which direction do I go. And I went into film school and never scored anybody's film. I just didn't see it as something that I could do, or just it's funny. I really wish that I could have scored all of my friends' films. But it wasn't until Michelle and I scored asking for it. Although yeah, I didn't score all of it, but I was part of it. But that wasn't until then that that I really like realized like, oh, I've been missing this thing under my nose my whole life of just like a way to have music and film be put together. And yeah, been loving it ever since.
Really awesome. And then, so when you started co-composing, what was that journey like, and how did that differ from composing solo versus getting to compose together on some projects?
Yeah, I think we started with this. We did a feature called Asking for It, and I was, I think he got additional music credit
I had 3 tours that
because
year.
he
It
was
got a little
touring. Yeah, he was
crazy.
like on tour the whole time. So I was really composing it. He was, doing additional music, which is very funny that I made him that credit. Um, but it was a really lovely collaboration because I'd always, worked solo, and I was at that time in a band, like writing all the music myself and writing all the lyrics and responsible for everything. And to just have someone else to bounce ideas off of and kind of edit each other was really remarkable. And since then, like I've scored some things on my own, but I genuinely prefer co-composing at this point because it is this really collaborative process that I think brings, for me, it brings out the best in both of us. And we're married. We can be very honest with each other. So there's a lot of just like brutal honesty involved, and we kind of tend to, we work on the same pieces. We don't like divide cues. So we'll start together, jamming out ideas, and then once we're really scoring a picture, it's like one of us starts and then we trade off and we just keep passing the same cue back and forth until it's like edited and reached its final form, which I think makes the best music.
Well, it allows us two brains, and I feel
Yeah.
like it's only an asset, and I can definitely like get in my head a bit of just like, oh, is this done? Like I just like keep stacking things to like overcooking it a bit, and I think sometimes when you are passing things back and forth, you get new perspective on the cue each time someone adds something, and I don't know, I think together we come to that conclusion of like, oh yeah, this is done,
Yeah.
in a much more direct way than I think sometimes if we were doing it alone.
Yeah.
Amazing. So when you're working on cues together and you get to the stage where you're passing them back and forth and editing, is so Connor and I do a very similar process when we co-compose. Um, what how do you decide what to keep in a cue and what gets cut?
I feel like sometimes like loudest voice wins in a way. Just like
It is true.
if you feel really strongly about something and it's like a hill you're gonna die on, like I feel like generally the other person is like, okay, yeah, that's fine. Like,
Hmm.
but usually, I don't know, sometimes I don't know, we just like make cases for it. Like there's definitely instances where I had babies that like you were just like, this is not working, dude. And over time you just kind of have to realize that we're serving the picture, so you just have to let go of certain things.
It takes the ego out of it.
Yeah.
When you have someone being like, okay, listen, we both want the same thing. We want this to be great. And what you're bringing to the table right now is not great. And
We're
I
talking
think,
about all of my bad cues. That's what
yeah, this only happens to Kevin. It's weird. My stuff just makes it in every time. Um, that's not true. But yeah, it's a fun process, and it's also interesting. Like, I'm curious how it works for you guys as friends, because and like how what the honesty looks like when you're friends with someone versus when like you're in a relationship with them, and like where that line is of like, being kind and tiptoeing, or like, that line. It's very, we don't, yeah, it's interesting that we don't really have to tiptoe around feelings anymore. And we also
Yeah.
like leave it all here. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't continue into our relationship because it is just work.
Yeah. I'd imagine it's the same. Like friendship, relationship is it's you get really close. We've been working together for 10 years now. Um,
Oh well.
and yeah, we just most of the time we find that we're on the same page, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the coolest part, I think, of co-composing. I'm sure you agree, is like the other person is always coming up with these ideas that are so cool that like never would have crossed your mind. And
Hmm.
then you hear them and then you're like, that is the coolest thing. I can't wait to build on that. Like,
Yeah.
Hmm.
Exactly.
yeah,
It's so awesome.
yeah. So let's hone in on Terminator Zero, which premiered on Netflix earlier this month. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Um,
Yeah.
so I'm going to link to the trailer in the chat if anybody would like to watch that later. But can you talk about how you were brought on board to Terminator Zero and how you started that series process?
Yeah. Oh gosh, so we were working on Mother Android, which was Mattson Tomlin's directorial debut back in 2021. And he was the showrunner for Terminator. He wrote and was the showrunner for Terminator Zero. So we knew that he was writing a TV series that was a Terminator, part of the Terminator franchise, but it was anime. And we decided, and this is how we got Mother Android as well. We sent him, um, we wrote like a ton of music, completely unsolicited, and we sent it to him, and he was very scared to open the file. But when he did, he really enjoyed it, and he ended up writing a lot of the script while listening to that music and really, really got attached to it. Um, he then had to like this was still such a long shot for us. It was not his decision at the end of the day. It was Netflix, Netflix Japan, and Production IG, the anime studio in Japan. And the director, Kudo, was a Japanese guy at IG who I don't think they really had any intention of hiring American composers. Um, so when it came time to hire someone, it was definitely like we're not hiring your friends. Like, what are you talking about? But at that point, Matson had put our music into their music library, so they had been animating to it without knowing.
Yeah, they just had this like playlist that they were working off of this whole time.
And they were like, so we're not going to hire your friends, but like, who did this music? And he was like, my friends. So they gave us a shot. It was, a really terrifying few months of, we're under this, we had like a
Trial.
trial contract where we were on a trial basis for the first 2 episodes. And after the first episode, they were like, all right, you're hired. But it was really, really scary. And the first episode, we got like tons of notes back, and we're trying to find the sound, and it was like very collaborative with Netflix. It was ended up being awesome, but we were definitely like terrified.
Yeah.
But then once we got going after that first episode, it was like extremely seamless, considering there were translators involved, and like we're sending our music to Japan, getting like a PDF of notes back that have been translated from Japanese to English, and it was, not a typical project in that regard.
Wow. What was the first thing you wrote for the series when you were doing those first couple of episodes?
That's interesting.
Well, the demos,
A lot of the demos, so all of the temp were the demos that we had created in 2021. So like those were our jumping off points for a lot of that first episode, especially because we wanted to like set big themes up for the whole rest of the series. So I mean, we probably started on the first cue.
yeah, Run,
Run.
which had been a part of our demos. So there's a track called Run. It's the first cue that happens in the series. And we had another part of the demo that we brought together, and we extended it, and we made it into this like 6-minute epic long scene.
Yeah, it's a lot longer than our demo.
Yeah,
So
and that was,
oh,
but because our music was the temp music, it made it a lot easier.
Yeah.
Because they already liked, the foundation of it. So that was probably the first thing we worked on
yeah.
the series.
And that
Can you
was like,
talk sorry, go ahead.
oh no, that was like the first pass. And I think what happened was, we did a first pass, we got these notes back, and they said this amazing thing in the notes, and they were Dylan from Netflix was just like, we just want you guys to be you. Like there were a few cues in it where we didn't really know what to do, and we kept thinking like, oh, we need to make it bigger or like a little bit more like orchestral, and it's like no, just do you. And it was as soon as that happened, we like reverted a little bit more back to like the original spirit of the demos, and everything just kind of just melded. Yeah.
That's so cool. So I know you mentioned coming up with the theme. Can we dive into how that process was and what your inspirations were for the theme?
Yeah. So that was part of this whole, because it was in the first episode. The theme happens in the very last part. It's the last cue of episode 1. And we, the original Terminator 1 and Terminator 2 films from the 80s and early 90s was composed by Brad Fiedel, and he has this epic Terminator theme that I'm sure you guys all know, but it is very it has the da 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 drum beat. It has these epic, this melody line, the da 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 da. It's very like melodramatic and big. And so we tried a bunch of things that were similar in like, big and strings and bold, and none of it was working. I think we did like 6 things. And this was probably the last cue that we scored of episode 1. So we'd already done everything else, and we're just trying to figure out this last piece. And when we talked to Matson about it, the showrunner, he's like, my favorite cue so far is "It'll Never Be the Same," which was one of the demos, and it hasn't changed much from demo form. That's like one that actually stayed.
It's probably the only one. Yeah.
And it was this really melancholic, track that happens while the main character is walking to work, and you see all the views of the city, and it's really existential dread and
very Radioheady,
kind of Radiohead vibes. And he was like, if I had my way, that would be the theme. So that gave us the idea to take the melody from "It'll Never Be the Same" and reconfigure it slightly to turn it into a more anthemic Terminator score. or the theme. And some of our influences that after we heard him say that, we're like, okay, we listened to Radiohead, Everything in Its Right Place, like a lot. And we listened to Nirvana.
Yeah, just like stuff that I think what kind of jarred us out of it, we took the songwriting approach of just like if you can play it on an acoustic guitar and hum it, then you have good bones. And I think that jarred us out of the computer. Like we were like all of these tries at this, I think we like so much of it was like in the box and we were just like trying all this stuff, kind of going crazy, and then just like sitting down with a guitar and playing like the three note progression. Um, it just we just started humming the "It'll Never Be the Same" melody line, but we just like tweaked it so it felt more singable, and that's how we, I guess, like made the jump from that demo into like, oh, this is like the Terminator Zero theme.
Yeah. Yeah. So we could play those if you wanted to see the difference.
Yeah,
I think
definitely. Let's
that's
do
on the
that.
thing.
Cool.
So I have It Will Never Be the Same. I'm going to share my screen.
And if you want, just for time's sake, you're welcome to start that at like second 25, maybe, so we can just get into the
Okay.
melody. Yeah, so that was, that original scene that Matson really loved
So
and
sleepy.
super sleepy, and we decided to take that sort of melody theme line and
Yeah.
turn it into something else. So then if you want to play the Terminator Zero from like, second 30, I think, you can get past the loud sounds and see what we kind of ended up turning it into. So that was that.
Sorry for the
Very
metal
cool.
hits.
And then, once we came up with that original, like that theme line, and we were happy with it, and we ended up adding in all these other elements. One of the things that Kudo, the director in Japan, thank you for the very sick theme. When the director really wanted us to incorporate Brad Fidel's original drum hit, the da 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 da.
Yeah, those weren't in there originally.
That was not necessarily our choice, but it ended up, I think I'm really grateful that we did that, that he wanted that, because it really does tie it in with the franchise. It only happens in that one track. We don't bring, anytime we bring back this theme like later, we don't bring in those drum beats, but like it was a great way to tie it in and like pay homage to the old while taking us into a new generation of this franchise. So I'm really glad we did that. And we also had, electric, that's Kevin playing electric guitar. When we go into like the heavy part of the theme, we had choir singing, which was such a cool experience. We got to record at Air Studios in London with the London Contemporary Orchestra singers. It's only an 8-piece choir, so it was very small, but
that was very cool.
It was very cool. It was very fun. What else did we do? That's kind of it.
Right? Yeah, I mean the other thing in there was also like somehow just like acoustic guitar.
The chugging,
like,
the chugging guitar is
it acoustic. I don't know, it just worked. But a lot of the same synths that we used throughout the whole show. The Rev 2 is a big one that we used, an arpeggiated synth that kind of just like blankets a lot of it. Yeah.
So cool. I love like the choir in there is such a cool touch. What was the inspiration behind using choir in the theme?
Yeah, I think we are both really into the human voice just in general. Like before this project, we're both singers, and how the way that we write music has a lot to do with the voice, and sometimes we'll replace it. But in this situation, we knew that most of the score was going to be electronic. It's the Terminator. It's about robots versus humanity. So because we were going to have this very electronic score, we wanted to add the human element so that we could sort of reflect those themes within the music. And having a choir, and it's 8 singers, so we had 8 singers for budget reasons, let's be honest, but
you really hear their voice.
You hear their voices, you hear the individual voices, so it makes it more human than like a 16-piece choir where you're just hearing this blanket of sound. So it actually worked to our benefit of like trying to achieve this like mirroring of themes within the music.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so
But we
that's
we also simultaneously did do some other like taking acoustic sounds and distorting them and perverting them into making them feel robotic as well at the
yeah.
same time. We like to marry that, but with the choir, it was very much like here's the human element, and against the backdrop of the madness.
It sounds so amazing. I love the theme. I actually also I do love that homage to the original percussion in there. Because like this is a series I'm sure we're all very familiar with the Terminator franchise. It goes back to the 1980s. There's half a dozen films. There have been other TV series. What were the challenges in coming up with a fresh new idea and Sonic World for something that a lot of people are probably already familiar with in some way?
I think I think getting out of our heads. I think that first like couple weeks of trying to write this theme, like one, the imposter syndrome was real, and just like you are up against, if you think too much about it, you're like, oh my God, what are we doing here? Like this is insane. But I don't know. I think trusting our voice, learning to trust our voice was the hardest thing in that
Hmm.
first pass. I don't know. I think once we started doing that, we started really allowing ourselves to like take the franchise somewhere else.
Yeah.
I don't
And I
know.
think it's always a hard thing when you are coming, I think coming into a franchise in general, it's difficult because it's epic for a reason. It's well known for a reason, and that is Brad Fiddel's score from the 80s. And you don't want to copy it because they could have hired him to do this. And you don't want to stray too far because then it's not part of the world. So there is this balance. I think incorporating, for us it was like choosing, and we've talked about how much of a struggle just that first episode was, and part of it was we knew we were on a trial too, so like this is not guaranteed, so there's a lot going on. But I don't know, coming to like this place of we are, first of all, it's anime, so that's a very new take, which was very helpful because we knew it would. I think if it was live action, it would have been a little tougher, but because it was anime, it gives you a little more flexibility in like character things and whatever. But like, I think we came to a decision eventually after trial and error with this theme that we wanted. I don't know. We wanted to like take a few elements from the original
Metal hits,
metal hits, arpeggiated synthesizers.
but slightly, but a more modern take of them.
Yeah,
Like, um,
that was kind of it, right? Was there anything else?
I mean, yeah, that we decided to ditch any. We had no strings in the entire score because that was a big part of that original theme, and we just decided instead we were going to really heavily lean into the human voice.
Hmm.
But yeah, we just took a few of the elements, and
And then throw everything else away and
yeah,
start fresh and modern. And we knew that we wanted this to be modern, based on what the showrunner and director wanted. So it was a little bit freeing to be like, all right, these are the elements we're going to take, and then these are all the new things that we're going to bring in.
yeah.
But it takes time to figure out for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds amazing. So what you did works so well. The whole soundtrack is so good and the whole series is amazing. It's really easy to accidentally binge watch. As I was telling Michelle and Kevin earlier, I sat down to watch a couple of episodes and 4 hours later had watched most of the series. So something that you said caught my attention was that this is an anime, and if it would have been live action, it would have been harder. Can you kind of touch on the differences in scoring animated versus live action, and what are the different challenges in that experience?
I think our feelings coming into it was that often in anime, there is no composer, and they're pulling from library stuff, and a character has a showdown with another character, and then all of a sudden we're listening to punk music, and then we're like it's very free form when it comes to the type of stuff that you can put in. I feel like you can we didn't we didn't stick to just like, okay, these are like the set melodies that we need to work within. Instead, each theme for each character got a really unique like voice. Hero's theme, Kenta's theme, right? Because they're all pretty different, melodically and also instrumentation.
Mhm.
And I don't know, there's something about anime where it's like, well, you can kind of do anything. And maybe that's also in anime. You can draw anything you can think of. So it felt like we could kind of meet them at that level at the
Yeah.
same time.
And we really leaned into like
Yeah.
character driven melody lines first. I think that's how we started, is that when we were just in the initial phase of like jamming and only seeing animatic with like kind of moving pictures and reading the scripts, we were really thinking about like, okay, what does this character sound like? What does this character sound like? What does this character sound like? And that's not necessarily just like an anime thing. Like that's obviously a tool that a lot of people use, but I think because it is anime, it does give you that freedom to play a little bit more. It might just be mental. Like
Yeah.
that's not, it's complete. We could have applied all of this to a live action, but I don't know. There was something about it being anime and like seeing the characters take form as we're writing the music, that helped us stick to these character themes as like the first stepping stone of the score.
Yeah.
Did you have any characters that really spoke to you and inspired you when working on these themes?
Yeah, oh man, I really loved Mizaki, who is the children's nanny. Um, she has a really big arc throughout the series, and we came up with her kind of theme very early, and then we were able to take, because she has this big arc where she figures out like who she is over the course of the 8 episodes, we deconstructed that theme to be very, very simple in the beginning. And that's
Just piano.
there's a piece called Mizaki Toy Store very early in the score, and that's the first time we see her, and it's just like a couple of notes, very like
Super deconstructed.
just on piano. And then there's a piece called Mizaki Comes Alive, closer to I forget what episode that is, but closer to the end, when she beats the shit out of some people. I'm just gonna spoil it. She beats the shit out of people, and it is the fully formed, fully realized version of her score, and it's all choir. So it's like almost a cappella. There's some synths under there, but it's this like the choir just did this gorgeous like Hocket technique of different singers singing different notes kind of over each other in this like really intricate way, and it's only like 45
Yeah,
seconds.
it's so short.
I wish it was longer, but it was a really cool thing to see her as a character progress and then be able to score her and progress the score.
Yeah. I think Rika's theme was also
Yeah.
something that we really loved. It was just felt really human, but also kind of like retro for some reason.
Mm.
And I really like Hero's theme. It's very loop based and it's really super emotional. We kind of knew what was going to happen to that character, in season 5 or whatever. So like we have like a lot of emotional stuff that we can bring to the table to some of these cues, and I really liked his.
Amazing. So we kind of touched on the characters and we'll try our best, but like potential spoiler warning. Were there any scenes that you had that like favorite scenes that you scored in the series?
Well, I feel like okay, this is police station is one that is
It's
the
the hardest.
it was maybe the hardest, and maybe that's why I like it so much, because we'd like cracked the code and it took a lot of puzzle piecing, and
Just a monster.
it was a really, really big scene where the Terminator's going through a police station and just like murdering everyone. And
And it's a
there's
throwback to T1
oh
as
yeah,
well.
it
Yeah.
does have some like references to T1, and we wanted to, score the action without overpowering the action. So there's all of that. And then something happens at the end to Mizaki, and it's a really big reveal moment. And that's when we bring her theme back in as well with all the voices, and like the sound drops out of the room and you just hear the voices come through. And it's like it was when we finished it was like 6 minutes or something. It was like a miracle that was done. And I think I just feel really proud of that one, because I think it just aids the scene. It's maybe not the most exciting thing, or it might not be the best to listen to on a soundtrack because it's very, very long. It's just like action. um, but when you watch it, it is one of those scenes that like just took so long to crack the code and so much happens that, yeah, at the end of it, I was very, very proud of it.
As a counterpart, I feel like one of my favorite ones was Emergence, which is it's an intro scene of episode 3, and that one was very easy. It was like a stream of
Yeah.
consciousness, like written in like a matter of like hours, and it was just like it was really fun because it was the first time in the series where we could get inside the Terminator's head, and it felt like oh, we're in serial killer mode right now, and just like scoring his inner thoughts as he kind of like prowled. It was a super fun one for the exact opposite reason that it was like,
Mm,
oh, finally something just we just did it, and then we were done, and then
yeah.
we moved on. So it was really
What was the process for getting feedback with when you were writing cues like that with the showrunners?
well with Matson. It was a lot. It was very collaborative because we'd do a spotting session with Matson. We'd you know do that whole process, and he would always get the first pass, and he is just great at giving emotional notes on music. So anytime we weren't hitting a beat or he wanted something, it was very easy. Like he just articulates it very well. We would then do that tweak, and usually that was enough, and then it would go to Netflix. And if they had notes, we were very lucky in this process of once we got over that first episode hump, we weren't really getting many notes back from Netflix, and then it would go to Japan, and usually like the notes from Japan would be like a really specific thing that the director wanted.
Hmm.
Like, I want to hear the drum beat here. Other than that, there wasn't, I don't know, am I missing?
No, it was, yeah, it was, we do a spotting session with Matson, take a week or so, write the entire, it was episode by episode. So like write the episode, send it to Matson. He sends us his notes, we tweak it, send it to Matson. He's usually like, okay, cool. And then we sent it off, and then we'd get, it was funny though, because there are translators involved. So like it would take
PDF.
weeks to get notes back from, this is a very long process. This is not like typical TV. Like we had like a month per episode. Um, and then we'd get notes back on a PDF, like, and they would be translated back from Japanese. There was one very funny time when we got this note back that was like, I'd like you to add some side dishes. And we were like, we were just like, are we dumb? Is this a thing that we just like don't know? Like,
It's the same.
side dishes.
It's the
We
same
looked up
word
what was, yeah,
as
so
light percussive.
side
Like,
dishes. We looked up, like, we're on Google, just like side dishes, Japanese side dishes, like blah blah blah, and we figured out that the Japanese word, there's the Japanese word that means both side dishes, like at a restaurant, and drum roll.
yeah, it's little
So we're like,
percussion.
got it. He means drum roll. Okay. So like we had a few like cute little things like that happened, but it was a funny process. Like getting just written notes back is kind of nice. You don't have to talk to any of the executives. You just get like a sheet.
But then we just wouldn't. Then we just stopped getting those.
Then we
I
stopped
think,
getting them.
yeah, by like the third or
Yeah.
like the fourth episode, it was just
For
smooth.
something that happened like across oceans with all these people involved, it was like the most seamless process you
Yeah.
could imagine, which was kind of wild. I feel like the Japanese team were just really excited to have composers because I don't think they're used to working with composers, and they usually do like more music licensing. That they were pumped, and it was really nice.
Yeah.
We had a lot of freedom.
Some side dish. I think we're all going to use side dishes now for
Yeah.
drum rolls.
Yeah.
It makes sense. I like kind of like get it.
Like, okay.
Yeah, little
Yeah.
side dishes.
Just a little something, little side dish,
Yeah.
just to complement the main dish. So we have a couple more tracks in here that I would love to have everybody listen to. Can you talk about a little bit about the traveling in time track
Yeah, that's a good
before we
side
listen?
dish side dish intro. It's got a lot of side dishes. That was a really fun one because it was Matson was asking for something like a little newer, I think. This is like the first time we get into like bells and really organic sounds.
Yeah.
Is in the future. Every time we were in the future, we really went um, more organic with it. Oh, yeah.
We used this a
All of
lot.
that.
This
Um,
little like meditation drum thing is very, very featured in this track.
yeah, and also a candle that
Oh yeah,
your friend made.
glass candle that we hit with a stick.
And yeah, it's one of the I think one of the references Matson brought up with was the score to Brick, and it's got tons of um, melodic bells. I love that score. And so it was a good jumping off point of like, this is something very new. And it also allowed us to develop a theme for time travel. Anytime time travel or the idea of time travel kind of comes up, we then had a new language for like, oh, little side dish bells. And, like you would kind of hear like a wisp of them. So this was a great jumping off point.
Cool, let's take a listen. Is there any certain point you'd like me to start in this track, or should we go right from the beginning?
Probably right from the beginning, and you don't have to play the whole thing. You can stop it whenever it feels. It's a pretty long track, so we
Yeah.
don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a peek. So cool. I love that sound design at the beginning. Can you talk more about the effects that you used up front in that track?
Yeah, yeah. I actually wrote. I went through this
Yeah, we
yesterday.
wrote them down because we
Uh,
forget everything. I blacked out. I don't remember how we made the
I,
score.
I called. I think we had three separate kind of stacks. I called them like bells, ripples, and pings. And some of them was that bell. Some of it was like the pings of the candle. Some of the like rolling of like the glass on glass sound, but a lot of it was just filtered through a crystallizer, Sound Toys crystallizer with reverb, and a bunch of delay. It's pretty simple,
Simple.
but it followed a the piano melody. So I think we'd pitch them accordingly so that they felt like they sat well with the melody of the piano.
Yeah, a lot of automated pitching happening in this whole score of like
Yeah.
drawing the little lines. There's got to be a better way to do this. Um,
It's so cool. Were there also like reverse sounds in there?
I think a lot of that was coming from the crystallizer.
yeah,
Okay.
we didn't put any reverse. I don't think, right? We didn't.
I don't
May
think
wait,
so.
we could. There is a
It's
chance
possible.
that early on when we got the audio, we took a few pieces and delay and reversed
Yeah.
them. That's very possible. I don't remember.
It sounds like as I was listening to it, I was like, this sounds like there's some like reversed audio, which is so cool for a Terminator
Yeah.
series
Yeah.
idea.
We did do a bunch of reversing of like we have a few like violin samples in the first track of the it happens a lot with the Terminator, but specifically the track Run in the very beginning, there's these like there's some just like violin like trills
Distorted to
that
hell.
we reversed and reversed and reversed and then like distorted more. And I think that was sort of something that we like to do is take these very organic sounds like violin or like hitting a freaking candle with a stick or a bell and filtering them so much that they become kind of unrecognizable because that is the Terminator.
Yeah.
Like it is, part of that theme of taking the human and roboticizing it.
Isn't that like one of the most fun things about being a film composer is when you get to do all those little Easter egg type things in the music that like a regular listener probably won't
Yeah.
catch, but we know. And
Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
yeah. Awesome. You mentioned Police Station earlier, and I would love to play some of this track for everybody.
Okay.
Could you kind of give us an intro and talk us in?
Yeah. Do you want to do it?
It's a monster.
It's a BPQ. I'm wondering where you should start from.
You could
Maybe
just start
like
from
middle
well, you
or
could do the
beginning.
beginning, and then if you want to jump to the middle, you could. It's so long. I mean, it was a hard one because there's just so many different beats to hit. I mean, the mapping out of just like what we needed to accomplish throughout the whole thing, it was a lot.
Mhm.
But I don't know, it was
We have an arpeggiated is it Oppenheimer? What's it called?
that was the OB Arteria arpeggiated bass synth that we used a lot of.
And that's kind of going through the whole thing. So you'll hear this like dum da dum dum da dum da dum dum throughout the entire thing. We do use some of those backwards, what we were just talking about, those backwards violin samples happen a few times in the beginning as well. And then we used when the horn, you'll hear if we get to it, there's a very intense like horn sound that's got like three notes. It's kind of one of the Terminator's themes. And that was the Anna 2 synth.
Yeah.
Which is a fun one. We have some landforms, synth
Yeah.
pads in there. We have the Prophet Rev 2
Yeah, and a lot of
in there.
pigments from Arteria.
And I think there's some choir in this.
Yeah.
And at the end, there's the Mizaki moment with the choir. So that's probably in the last minute and a half where the sound sort of drops out and you get that big moment.
Cool. So I'm going to play this. I'm going to play a little bit of the beginning, a little of the middle, and I want to try to catch that at the end
Okay, great.
because it's such a cool moment. All right.
That was a good
Overview.
yeah.
It was hard for me to skip because I just wanted to keep listening.
Yeah.
But man, that choir sounds so good, and that bass, so cool.
Yeah. The choir I feel like really made Mizaki's theme. And that
Yeah.
was really exciting to record. And to be able to like have that featured in a scene like this that was so action heavy and so dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the most challenging moment within that track to find as you were writing?
I think that moment where the thing happens to Mizaki that I won't say because it's like a really big spoiler. I feel like that was a really hard moment to figure out because it was, I mean,
The balance.
it was cool because we wanted to bring in her theme. We already knew what the theme was, so that was great. But there was a balance of like finding it where this major, major thing happens, and then we want the sound to drop out, and we want the choir to come up, and I think that was hard. And then the other thing that I found challenging was just during this action thing. It's like Terminator's on the prowl, then he starts killing people, then he's on the prowl again, then he starts killing people. Then we're with the boys, and they're running and hiding, and all these things are happening, and you don't want to like overpower it with like hits on metal hits
Yeah.
like and when to bring the arpeggiated synth out, when to bring it back in. It was nice to have that really low like the OB synth going like dun 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 dun, dun to kind of keep the movement going. So anytime we needed to like come back down to it, we did. But it was hard to find a balance of not wanting it to be like epic action but not wanting to overpower.
Well, and knowing when to get out of the BPM. I mean, we were
Yeah.
The Oberheim, we were in that rhythm for a really long part, and then finding the right
Switch to
action part of the scene where it's like, oh, we need our heart rate to pick up now. I think it took us a while to figure that out because at first it was just like we just blanketed the whole thing, same BPM. We're like, this is just we're not feeling the anxiety we need to be feeling. So I think figuring out when to pull that trigger and how to do it,
Yeah.
I think was really challenging.
Definitely. Well, we have about 8 minutes left. I'd love to open up to questions. If anybody has questions for Michelle and Kevin, please, you can either put them in the chat or go ahead and ask in audio. Austin.
Hey guys. Wow. I actually kind of purposely like didn't listen to the soundtrack until today because I wanted to hear your guys's inside perspective. And just first of all, kudos. I think the direction to like approach them like songs with like the humming and the memorability was just like such a good choice. And I'm already adding this theme to my playlist to like have a focusing like ADDH, moment when I need a soundtrack. Um, so I have two questions. One is like, what was the relationship with music editing? were there any changes that once you saw the series, like sitting down on Netflix, were there any surprises about the placement of music? And then my second question is also, what was your relationship with releasing the soundtrack with Lakeshore Records and like mixing and
Yeah,
mastering that and how that's different from the score?
great question. Okay, so editing, after the first episode, we didn't have a music editor. And it's a little surprising because there's a series, but we got like three finished versions of the anime,
Three
like the
final
animatic.
locked cuts.
So like a bunch of locked cuts. So timing changed. And then we were scrambling because we had to change all of our time codes. And that was a concern, right? We're sending everything to Japan. They're going to mix on their end. We had a music mixer,
And still to animatic form. So
but still, yeah. So like they were the last people to touch it and place it. So I was worried that there might be some like wrong placements. There weren't any, right? It all worked out somehow. But after the first episode, we told Netflix like y'all need to hire a music editor because this is gonna get a little crazy, especially if there's gonna be multiple like locked cuts. So we got Ariel Lowe, who is our music mixer. We got them hired directly from Netflix, which was great. And
it was super seamless because Ariel could just mix it and then, have control over delivering it properly.
So Ariel was the one, after episode 1, Ariel was the one to take all of the stems, deliver them to Netflix. And if anything changed, Ariel was the one to then change mostly the time codes, really. Like that's really what needed to be shifted. But if there were little tweaks, Ariel could then do that.
And we would meet with them and figure that out. Yeah.
The soundtrack question, oh baby, that was a real
touch and go.
That was touch and go. So I don't know what we're allowed to say, but I'm just gonna be
I mean,
whatever.
Terminator's owned by it's like a split I think like Studio Canal and Skydance have rights, and Netflix, has the master. So there's a lot of
cooks in the kitchen.
Yes, and I think for a while Skydance needed like the go ahead from Studio Canal that they could put out a soundtrack, because I guess technically a soundtrack qualified as another story or like another retelling of the franchise. So I think they needed the rights approved, and we were told at one point from Skydance like it's not going to happen this year. We've never seen it happen this quickly, and maybe next year, season.
At this point, we were like 1 month from release, so it was very, very,
very last minute.
We were trying to push for this to happen like for months, but Netflix first checked it out, got back to us weeks later saying that they didn't have the rights. We'll find you someone at Skydance. So there was like a lot of tossing us around, telling us it wasn't possible. And then we had met Becca from Lakeshore.
For Cutting Edge, technically.
For Cutting Edge, who is part of Lakeshore.
Yeah.
At an AWFC thing, like
a year ago.
And at the same, we were always going to reach out to her because we really wanted Lakeshore to put this out. And it was so funny because it was like the exact same day, like that all of this was happening. We got an email from Becca being like, hey, how are you guys? Want to get drinks? So we were like, we were about to reach out to you. So we got drinks. We told her what was going on. She was like, all right, let's get in there. So Lakeshore got in there with Skydance, and in the matter of 2.5, 3 weeks, figured it out.
Got artwork approved.
Got it all out on time. It was a complete miracle because this was not going to happen.
And we had to playlist the whole, like we didn't think it was going to happen, so we stopped like thinking about the soundtrack. So we had to whittle down 3.5 hours of music to
an hour 15
in like the matter of a weekend. So, and then that's the soundtrack.
Yeah. And now, I mean, it's just so funny how the soundtrack not come out. It would be a very different release for us.
Yeah.
The soundtrack is doing like shockingly well on Spotify. People are listening to it. People are like DMing us, and like, had it not happened, it would have been so sad.
Yeah.
So we're just so grateful.
I'm so glad that worked out. I think it's like it's also just a great entry point to discover the music, because for people who maybe are not like who aren't like anime fans per se, this will be their entry point, and then they'll want to watch the show, and then vice versa. You have people who want to watch the show who want to replay it. So I'm so happy that worked out.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because a lot of times the studios don't really care. It's not, the soundtrack's not a moneymaker for them, so they don't think it really matters that much. And if you're in this position, I would just say like advocate for yourself as hard as you can and try to find a label like Lakeshore or someone else who's able to make it happen for you and like get them involved, because it benefits the show to have the music out. Like it does.
Yeah.
And even if it's not like they can't see it on their bottom line, like it really is a part of it and people are asking for it. So like why wouldn't there be a soundtrack? It costs them like nothing to put it on Spotify. So God.
Good question. We have another question here in the chat from Subi. It says, hi, thanks so much for taking the time to do this chat. I'm traveling, so she's going to ask a question here. First of all, really cool score, not easy one for sure. Love the police station action cue. Not easy to make an interesting action stuff. My question is, what's next for you? Have you got another project on the horizon?
Yeah, we've got a horror thriller indie movie that we're about to start as soon as we get back from your sister's wedding.
Yeah.
And then,
So we're doing an indie horror feature that we're about to start. I'm doing a short film by myself that kind of came out of nowhere. And yeah, I think we're really, really hoping to get into video games. So we're putting that out into the universe and we're going to be, we're doing a lot of like outreach in that area because it just feels like sort of a natural next step after a score like this to get to do a game. But yeah, hoping for more TV and video games and films.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, we are right up to 11 o'clock, so we probably need to wrap it up. But I want to say thank you, Michelle and Kevin, so much for taking the time to talk with us today and to share some of your process. Score is amazing. Highly recommend everybody check out this show, check out Michelle and Kevin's website and some of their past projects. So thank you so much.
Thank you guys
Thanks so much
much.
for having us.
It's really fun to
Yeah.
talk with other music people about the
Yeah.
specifics. So
Thank you.
Yes.
appreciate you guys.
And thank you, Connor Cook, and thank you everybody for coming today. And we'll see you at the next Insight session.